this this Love 24/7 vision all started a couple years ago, and kind of all pieced together over time. It didn't all just come to me at one time. This is pieced together over several years. But I thought of the Love 24/7 concept and a 24/7 worship concept um, before I had ever even heard of David's tent, and this that I didn't even know this idea was already spreading around within the Christian world, and um, and then I started reading the book of Revelations and noticing the 24 elders and then the seven lampstands. So I thought of the 24/7 stuck out to me, and 24, it just stuck. There's 24 hours in a day, and there's 7 days in a week, and both of those make a complete cycle. So we know the week represents the creation of the whole universe, the 7 days of creation in the beginning. The 24 represents, obviously the 24 hours in one day. So those two really stuck out to me, and I started just, imagining that the whole universe was just all for God was just one day, one singular complete whole day. God doesn't experience fragmentation or time. So God is not in one place, so he doesn't experience space and time. So I started thinking of for Elohim, um, which is written in the Bible itself. For Elohim, it's all one moment, one day, one singular event, one thing. This singular moment and event. And then I started noticing how the seven surrounds the throne and the 24 elders surround the throne. So I'm thinking, the day, the week representing the whole creation of the universe, and the 24 elders representing the day. So our understanding of time as we approach God is completely lost. And then as you get to the throne, it's all swirling and energy and lightnings and rainbows and thunders, and it's like you're entering it's like you're entering into eternity from the perception of local time. The elders are all, if you notice, observing the throne, and the seven lampstands surround the throne. So much in the same way, the 7 days of creation, the multiverse, the universe, surrounds and God is able to move through and beyond the whole entire universe. So that started sticking out to me as being, as I was like, oh, that's really something. And then you read, of course, in the Bible where it says a day is like 1,000 years, and 1,000 years is like a day. So it says that in the Bible that for God, time has no meaning. Space and time, therefore, have no meaning. God is of infinite size, infinite potential, infinite depth. He is God, the mind of God, the being of God would fill all things in all moments in space time, um, making everything one singular moment, one singularity. There is no way of escaping that. If God is in all things and through all things, God's presence is in all things and through all things, then God's um, person, his being, his consciousness, is that singular moment, that singular, absolute, full moment and being of the whole universe. That doesn't experience time like we do, because we're in a coordinate in space time. So we experience something. The stars seem far away. They seem to be rotating. The planet seems to rotate at a particular um, you know rate. 20. We call that 24 hours in a day. Um, for God is in every quadrant surrounding the planet. God's perception is surrounding the entire planet. God's perception is surrounding the entire sun. God's perception is not in time as ours is. So God is in and through everything, every moment in space and time. So that really stuck out to me, and and then I started seeing the parallels of the sevens. So the lamb seated on the throne with 7 horns and 7 eyes. So you have seven things that go out, 7 things that come in. The eyes see and absorb, and the horns go outward, project outward. So you're looking at out in points. So it's like as if the whole universe is like this living, organism. The 7 days of creation, surrounding the throne. The mind of Christ, the mind of God, putting on the mind of Christ, talks about to overcome and become one with God, with the Father. So you already see some parallels to what I was thinking in the Bible itself. And then I just kept reading, Daniel, the prophet Daniel. I used to read Daniel over and over again. I didn't fully understand it, and then I finally realized the prophecies of Daniel are coming from outside of time. That there's no better, more clear prophecy than in the book of Daniel. It was written several hundred years before Jesus. It says Jesus is coming. It says that the stone in Daniel chapter 2, and in the days of these kings, the God of heaven will set up a kingdom which shall never be destroyed. In the book of Daniel, chapter 2, verse 45, and as much as you saw that the stone was cut out of the mountain without hands, and that it broke into pieces the iron, the bronze, the clay, the silver, and the gold, the great God has made known to the king what will come to pass after this. The dream is certain, and its interpretation is sure. So, again, a tiny singular stone somehow shatters open gold, bronze, silver, iron, and clay. So again, these are metaphorical references. So the understanding of the kingdom of heaven, the understanding of Christ, will invade each of these kingdoms that were set up, and then would finally fully devour all the peoples of the world. The knowledge of the kingdom of heaven will expand throughout the entire world. The glory of God. This is referring to the glory of God, which the knowledge will fill the entire earth. So that's the glory of God reference right there. Obviously, that hasn't happened yet. We haven't seen the world filled with the glory of God. We've seen quite the opposite. So there's a missing portion. There's a missing understanding. So we continue reading in Daniel chapter 10, 11, and 12, where we're told of this this understanding that has to come, that these things aren't going to be fully understood. So the Daniel prophecy in chapter 9 tells us of the coming of the Messiah, that Jesus would come in 490 years, that the Messiah would be cut off. That's Christ, and then that he would go to the throne, and that's the book of Revelations. And then he's told that he says, the messenger to Daniel says, I will reveal to you what's written in the scroll of truth. But then he says, do not write it, seal it up, for it is not meant to come until the time of the end. So we know that the scroll of truth was around in 500 BC by an old man with a beard and silk on, was showing this to Daniel, the scroll of truth. A man who was traveling across Persia, across the Silk Road. Daniel receives this scroll, digests it, he reads it, he understands it. It makes sense to him as he reads this scroll, and the old man tells him, mankind is not ready. He says knowledge must increase. People must come to a full understanding of this concept, and that it will be revealed in the very end, toward the end times. So this scroll is obviously the scroll of Revelation, the seven seals, the sealed scroll that was released. This man seems to be somewhat of a prophet, an angelic messenger, a prophet, something of that nature. We're not fully told, but he approaches Daniel in what seems to be a spiritual and physical sense, where he's then told the prophecy of the coming of the Messiah, that the Messiah must first come to access this knowledge, to set the standard for the iron scepter and the sword of the Spirit. so that the Messiah can then um, give this give this glory to the saints. That's what the whole entire book of Revelation is talking about, and the Messiah has to heal mankind first, because the power of the glory of God given over to evil would be a disaster. We wouldn't want to see the world, that the state of chaos that the world was in before the flood, happening all over again. So this is kind of the whole idea here, is that Jesus is going to heal the world and heal mankind. And then the power of God can be fully tapped into and fully released, fully unleashed. There's no need for evil in the world. There's no need for people to do evil. And just because they have godly power and godly potential doesn't mean people have to use that for evil purposes. That's where the Holy Spirit comes in, of course. The vision of the glory of God. Daniel chapter it's in Daniel chapter 12, where he talks about the great tribulation. At that time, Michael will stand up, the great prince who watches over the sons of your people. He says, many of those who sleep in the dust of the earth will awake, some to everlasting life, and some to everlasting shame and contempt. Those who are wise will shine like the brightness of the firmament, those who turn many to righteousness like the stars forever and ever. But you, Daniel, seal up the words and seal up the book until the time of the end. Seal up the scroll of truth. So those are the 7 seals that it's talking about in the book of Revelations. Many will go to and fro, and knowledge will increase in the earth. And one man clothed in linen, who said, how long shall it be until the fulfillment of these wonders? And he said to the man clothed in linen on the other side, it shall be a time, times, and half a time, when the power of the holy people has been completely shattered. All these things shall be finished. Although I heard, I did not understand. Go your way, Daniel, for the words are sealed up until the time of the end. Many will be purified and made white and refined, but the wicked shall continue to do wickedly, and none of the wicked shall understand, but the wise will understand. So this is the key, that the wise are going to understand this scroll, and these things, these mysteries are going to start to be revealed. So this is referring to the end times at the point that this understanding is released in the book of Revelation. So that refers to the 7 stars, the 7 seals of the scroll, and the 7 stars. The 7 stars have a reference to the 7 seals. So I began looking at the 7 stars at that point, understanding that the 7 stars unlocks the key of the mystery. I saw that the 7 stars were related to the Pleiades and the 7 churches. So the 7 churches and the 7 stars are aligned together. Which also aligns it with the scroll. The Pleiades rest behind the bull, and rest behind the horns of the bull, which is the Taurus. And every single depiction of Lao Tzu I could find, almost all of them in China, show him riding the bull, riding the Taurus, carrying the scroll where the 7 stars are, where the 7 seals are. The scroll is always in his hand as he's riding across the mountains, carrying this scroll behind the horns of the bull. So you can see the Taurus and the 7 stars. So I began to just, these things came to me over time. I saw the Tao is called the uncuttable stone because it fills all things. It holds all things together. The Tao is the Tao shatters gold, silver, iron, bronze, and clay because it fills everything up. So it's this seamless thing that fills the inside of all physical objects and physical substances, returning them to the realm of the spirit. So all things emanate from the spirit, from the spiritual. This also ties into quantum physics and quantum mechanics naturally. because the substance of the Tao is at the deepest levels of the physical universe. So if we go deep into the physical makeup of this stone, this is a perfect example. You can kind of this opaque stone, you can sort of see through it. You can see that there's density within it, but yet you can also see light kind of shining through. So there's this opening. That's like the Tao. The field of the Tao is like a stone because it fills everything up and holds everything together. So it's so elusive. It's so dense that it becomes elusive. It's so dense that it holds this stone together. It's flowing through this stone just as much as it's flowing through my hand or any singular point in the universe. It's the most infinitely dense point. That's what it seems to be talking about. And that infinitely dense point loops back to the highest dimensional aspect of God. Um, so it's an internal, um, it's really an internal dimension within three-dimensional space. That does sound a lot to me like string theory. That also sounds a lot like the hidden dimensions of string theory, which talk about a higher dimension, a higher dimensional space within a multiverse. So this all ties in together. The coming of the revelation of the scroll, the Tao, quantum mechanics, and the Lamb, the field, the glory field. Um, this happens to be a time where we are actually trying to crash particles together to understand the laws of quantum physics, and they're realizing that as you go, the deeper you go, stuff that seems solid is actually made of elusive particles, elusive energetic particles, which they think at the deepest level are these vibrating, stretching strings that go into a hidden dimensional space and somehow loop through a multiverse and back to the what I would call the mind of God, the being of God. So everything is really in that state because this space is also hidden within every aspect of three-dimensional space. So that starts to sound a lot like the exact same thing that we're talking about. Understanding it on a spiritual level and a quantum physical level. And that the mind of God literally fills all things and holds everything together through this understanding. And then the letter to each of the seven churches, Jesus is revealing this very same thing. He's saying, I hold the iron scepter, which is there to break and dash what Daniel just talked about, the nations, the empires. That is reference to the Tao. The Tao invades and shatters everything open because it's so dense. It's denser than any other object. It literally it is inside of the gold. It's what gives gold its substance and material. It's what gives silver substance. It's what gives iron substance, clay. So therefore the iron scepter shatters everything open. And then the sword of the Spirit, the point of the sword, penetrates through everything. We learn in the New Testament that the word of God is sharp, quick, it's instant actually, piercing, dividing asunder the bones and marrow, the flesh and joints, down into the place of the spirit and the heart and the mind. So this field pervades the entire physical body into the physical internal parts of the heart and the brain, the mind, the soul, and the spirit. So it is a field that goes back and it begins in the physical realm and goes back into the spiritual. That's very obvious. That is the sword of the Spirit that Jesus is holding, and then he has eyes like the flames of fire. So he consumes all things. If your eyes are flames of fire, you see and consume and hold all things together. The eyes that are flames of fire. So in other words, omni aware, omnipresence. God sees all things. That's the fire, that the absorbing of all things in the multiverse are absorbing into the presence of God at the center of the throne, which becomes the central point of all things, the Tao, the way, the entire existence, the entire culmination of all existence is this place, this singular, the midst of the point of the throne, the midst of the fire, the eyes of fire, surrounded by thunders and lightnings and rainbows. That's all the energetic properties of the multiverse are all held and absorbed into this place and held together in this place. It is the source and the epicenter of all things. So it's the source of and the return of all things. That's why it holds all things together. Jesus reveals this. Now that he has the iron scepter and the sword of the Spirit, he then starts revealing exactly what it is, what he is. I am the beginning and the end. So that's this point is the beginning and the end. The throne of God is the beginning of all things and the end of all things. Who is, was, and is to come, beyond all space and time. We're starting to see a picture here. Alpha and the Omega, the first and last. I am he who lives and was dead, and behold, I am alive forevermore. Amen. I have the keys of Hades and death. So again, this field, this field pervades all space, all things. So if you picture a person at the moment of death, they're full of the field at the moment of death. At that point, their spirit and their soul is then transferred into that field. So the keys of Hades and death, he has the keys of all of time. All people who have ever died are in this same field. But through sheer simple understanding of it, it holds everything. It holds all things. It holds it down to the deepest parts of the consciousness and the soul and the spirit. So it holds, it is the source of those things, and it is the return. So it's as if the living person, they're born at a point in time, they die at a point in time. That process is fully held together in that field, and the moment they die, just as the moment they were born, they're instantly in that field again. And then the judgment of all the things that they've done that are opposed to the Word of God, obviously, are then brought to account. So this is the key to Hades and death. This glory field, this field is the key to Hades and death. Understanding of the Tao, understanding of the way. And he just keeps making these statements. He says, he says, I can give you the crown of life. He who has an ear, let him hear what the Spirit says to the churches. Whoever overcomes shall not be hurt by the second death. So the crown of life is that, again, the energetic properties of the life force of chi within us. So when we fully become one and washed in that field of glory, the crown of life is then given. I believe that those are actually points in the brain, of energetic points of chi flowing through the central nervous system and then out of the brain, pouring outward. If we could see that field, that's what it would look like. It would look like crowns of energy. Yeah, he says, I hold the living word, the word of God, the sharp two-edged sword, piercing all things, piercing even soul and spirit. So, and then here again, each thing is referring to the same thing. He who has an ear, let him hear what the Spirit says to the churches. I will give him some of the hidden manna to eat, and I will give him a white stone and on the stone a new name that no one knows except him who receives it. The hidden manna and the white stone, these are the same thing. Again, we're just breaking open the meaning and understanding of the way, of the Tao, of the universe. The sword of the iron scepter, the sword of the Spirit, the key to Hades and death, the white stone, the hidden manna, it all becomes the same exact central point, the same properties. because all things come from the field. All things come from the glory of God, from the wellspring, the emanation of God, which is, this would be in the same way the Tao, same referencing the Tao. To the one that overcomes, he shall rule them with a rod of iron. They shall they shall dash nations to pieces like a potter's vessel. So again, gold, silver, iron, bronze, and clay. If I have the understanding of the Tao, if I have the true understanding of the Spirit of God, that there's no physical substance, what meaning does gold have to me? Gold has no density. Gold has no purpose within this field. This field ascribes the properties of all things. Quantum physics proves this. All things are really quarks and electrons and fundamental particles, and then the relationship between those defines physical material, the physical material reality. Whoever comes will be clothed in white garments, and I will not blot out his name from the book of life. So how do you stay in the book of life? You get clothed in the white garments, which is being washed and purified, as it just said in Daniel chapter 12. Having that knowledge, having the understanding, having the wisdom of the Tao, of the way, being purified through Qi, having the entire body fully flowing with the river of life and the word of life and Qi, which is simply vibrating and emanating in that field at all times and not deviating from it, knowing the way, knowing the word of life and the river of life. And if you do mess up, if you do stray, return to the river, return to the tree of life, return to the wellspring, and wash yourself again. You're allowing it to flow through you and pass through you again. You're coming back into the full understanding of the field again. And then you remain in that field. That's the whole idea. Washed in the blood of the Lamb. The Lamb who sits on the throne. The Lamb becomes that full field emanation flowing through the entire multiverse. From day 1 to day 7. Becoming the unified 8th day. The 8th day glory. The singular day that holds all days together. The singular day, which is the 8th day, holds the 7 days together. The creation of the beginning and the end of the universe. You have the 7, and then you have the 8, the higher dimensional point. There's just so much here. It just goes on and on as you begin to break this down. I will make a pillar in the temple, he shall go out no more. I will write on him the name of my God and the name of the city, the New Jerusalem, which comes down out of heaven from my God, and I will write on him my new name. He who has an ear, let him hear what the Spirit says to the churches. So again, the heavenly Jerusalem comes down out of heaven and enters into your heart. The heavenly Jerusalem is that pure, perfect golden cube with pearls and rivers flowing, the river of life flowing through it, the river of Qi, the river of life. The tree of life. That's when you're fully surrounded by the glory of God at that point, seated on the throne with the Lamb. So you become an emanation point, in symmetry with the multiverse, in symmetry with the flow of the entire multiverse at this point. So it all becomes it's all self-contained, with invisible golden walls, the heavenly Jerusalem, the place of peace. You're now at peace. You're washed pure and clean, living fully in flow with the way of Qi, the river of Qi, and the wellspring. You're fully at one with the will and intention of the multiverse, of the Father, the Source, the Creator. At this point, surrounded by that heavenly Jerusalem cube, with its 12 gates, and with the Lamb at the center of the throne, who provides your light, who gives you the illuminates you with light. A light more intense than even the sun itself, more intense than the moon, more intense than the stars, because of the understanding of the universal glory. The glory fills the sun, it fills up the moon, the stars, the space in between, the sky, the heavens, the earth, the galaxy, the multiverse. This glory is on a deeper level than even photons of light, even physical light, the light that we see. It's an even more subtle and deeper level than that. As you approach it, you start to realize its absolute essence was there before God said, let there be light. So it's an even deeper, crystal clear wellspring than even the tangible physical light that flows through the universe. I counsel you buy from me gold refined in the fire. So the new gold that you have and you hold is the understanding, the refinement of the physical world and the physical universe through the understanding of the Tao is a new piece of gold. This gold is unbreakable. This gold that I have, this gold I have in my hand right here, is right is the Tao. That's the full understanding of the Tao, the wisdom that I have, knowing that its presence is everywhere. It's present. It defines gold. It creates. This becomes the philosopher's stone. This becomes the alchemy. Right, turning lead into gold. Right. You can in anything that exists becomes the gold of the Tao through understanding. All things become pretty much fundamentally made of the same substance, with just slight variations in quantum physical properties. It's all made of the same substance on the deepest levels, emanating from the realm of the spirit. And I will grant him, and then finally he says, I will grant him to sit with me on my throne, even as I overcame and sat down with my Father on the throne. He who has an ear, let him hear what the Spirit says to the churches. So this is to the individual who has come into this full glory revelation. This is also to the church. So it's a dual message. This message is to John. It's to the churches in the first and second century. It's also to every individual living now. It's to every single church living now. Every single person who claims to follow and believe in God. The message remains the same, and the message is loud and clear. There is only one way to the throne. It's through your heart, through inside of you, through that spiritual revelation and understanding. And then Christ, John is watching the throne room. Christ goes and takes the scroll from the man's hand and begins to open up the seven seals. So the scroll is now being opened, the scroll that Daniel had referred to. In theory, this would be the scroll of truth mentioned in Daniel chapter 10, the scroll of truth that Daniel had read. So as you approach this understanding, it all begins to make sense now. When you understand the full meaning of the Tao as a fundamental field which flows through the entire multiverse, that's what makes it a solid, dense stone, an immovable stone. The philosopher's stone, the white stone, the opaque stone that it's referring to. Why it's immovable? Because it becomes the full presence of God. It is the presence of God. It is a stone so big that God cannot move it, because it's the presence of God himself. God is that opaque, absolute, singular, flowing singularity through all things, holding all things together. It's the context for all space, motion, weight, and measure. How could it be moved? It is the absolute singular presence of God. The eyes of fire, seeing through all things. God's eye. We can picture God's eyes as absorbing all things. God's presence absorbs all things. So he's not in one singular place in space-time. He's at every place in space-time, in every direction in space-time, flowing through everything. And then the trump, of course, the trumpets happen at this point. The two witnesses are brought forward. And then finally, Revelation chapter 12, where the dragon rises up and Michael rises up to fight against the dragon. So again, you have the seed of the woman and the seed of the serpent now clashing, as is mentioned in Genesis chapter 3. So the culmination of all of prophetic history is now coming to its culmination, where the serpent will be defeated and crushed by this stone, by this understanding, by the full understanding of the glory. The serpent is now defeated. All the teachings of the serpent that the serpent taught in the Garden of Eden are rendered meaningless through the full understanding of the sword of the Spirit, the Word of God, and the complete revelation of the glory of God, filling and holding all things together from the beginning to the end. One singular, absolute, full presence and full glory that culminates in our return to the river of life, to the throne of God, to the very throne of God, to the very essence of the multiverse itself, all in one singular place, the heart of God. That is the culmination of the love. That is the basic. That is the love 24/7 message that I want to share with the world. I I listen to audiobooks a lot. One day I was just listening to the Tao Te Ching. I was playing it on my my YouTube on my phone on YouTube and listening to it, and it at first it didn't mean much to me. I didn't think about it. It was just it seemed like an interesting concept. The Tao, I started thinking about it and wondering, you know, what could this be? And I listened to it, and I listened to it. Something about it drew me in. I listened to it several times. I listened to the Tao Te Ching multiple times, and one day I was just sitting there in my car driving, and it was like I felt something awaken in me as I started to picture the Tao. As if you keep listening to it, you start picturing this point, and you go, it started opening my mind to thinking about it, and I go, it fills everything, it's everywhere, it's inside of everything. It goes through all of space, all of time, it passes through everything, it passes through all light, all other um, quantum fields. So I started realizing the Tao, there's something to this. I pictured it passing through all of space and time, this singular point, and I just pictured that point, and I said, well, it's almost undeniable. If that point exists, and that point can be said to flow throughout the entire multiverse or universe, or then it almost has to exist. It describes it as an infinite well of potential and an infinite field, an infinite expansion. So it meets it meets the beginning and it meets the end. And it fills all things in between. It meets heaven and earth. It passes through and meets all people, all beings who have ever existed would, in theory, be within this same field, within the Tao. The Tao is the source and the culmination of all things. So the understanding of the Tao started unlocking understandings for me in my mind, because I'm going, I was thinking, well, that sounds a lot like the presence of God, the belief that the belief that God fills all things and holds all things together. So God Himself, the Creator, um, it almost sounds like the same thing. So the only seeming difference is that the Tao seems to be almost a field, um, and then when you place Elohim through that, that's when I started realizing that God's presence seems to fulfill the understanding of the Tao. The light of God, in other words, the presence of God, when you place those two together, it makes perfect sense. If you just have the void of the Tao without the consciousness of God, then you're just left with almost a void, like this opaque, empty void. So that's where I think the white stone comes in, is that the glory of God fills it. So it's full of the glory of God at all points. That's where I believe obviously the message of the coming of Christ was meant to come and to fulfill and activate the meaning of this stone, of this white stone, the stone that Jesus talks about. So no longer just a hazy, opaque, purely clear stone, but it becomes um, full. It becomes full of glory, full of life, full of the presence of God and the love of God. The Lamb seated on the throne then illuminates, talks about how he's in the midst of the heavenly Jerusalem and illuminates it from the inside. He illuminates, in other words, the universe. He illuminates creation now. The Lamb illuminates everything with this uh, being, with consciousness itself, with being, with love. The Bible then talks about how love is beyond all understanding. Love holds all things together. Love hopes all things, trusts all things. And I was like, oh, that's it. That's the field that it's talking about. It's the love glory of God, the love 24/7, literally. So you have the love, the being of love, and then the 24/7, the perfect singular day of the universe, and the full completion of the week, the seven, is achieved through us and our recognition of Christ on the throne. Um, on Sunday morning, coming out of the cave on Sunday morning, um, coming out of the grave on Sunday morning, after descending to Hades, it says he then fills all things. So the same exact concept of the Tao is now replaced by the purpose and being of God. So it's the fulfillment and the completion of these concepts, of these ancient concepts. Now you have the absolute completion, and that seems to be the completion of the eighth day rest and the eighth day glory, which is the absolute singularity and oneness of God filling all things, including every person. The glory of God filling the earth as waters cover the sea. So, in other words, a field, the full understanding of this flowing, emanating field, which flows through the middle of the earth all the way to throughout the atmosphere and all the way up into the heavens. So it's a complete picture that's restored here through this understanding. And finally, in Revelation chapter 22, the full picture is given. He says, "Come unto me, all you who are thirsty, and take in this knowledge of the Tao, the understanding, this wisdom, not literal water, but he says crystal clear water that will nourish you, that will fully complete you and fill your understanding, which is what it has done for me. I continue to seek and am drawn into God every single day. Of course, this doesn't just stop at one point. You keep getting immersed in this wellspring, and you find that it keeps on immersing you. It's a never-ending glory to glory to glory to glory. Um, the river of life, the wellspring, tree of life, and the fruits for the healing of all the nations. That's the final culmination of the book of Revelations, is that the person has now returned to Eden, to the state that we were once in the glory of God, walking in the cool of the day, with the presence of God and the full understanding of the presence of God flowing through us 24/7. Finally, in conclusion, in Revelations 22, Jesus says, "I have sent my messenger to testify to you these things in the churches." Speaking of John, "I am the root and the offspring of David, the bright and morning star," which is the planet Venus aligning with the midst of the seven stars of the Pleiades, forming what? The eighth light, the eighth day glory shining through the seven stars, the 7 days of creation, filling all things.